Wow. Another podcast. We made it.
Yep.
We're getting closer to our 100th episode.
Are we? I was just going to ask you, but I was afraid you were going to tell me we went over.
No, we're getting closer and closer.
Are you counting? Keeping track?
I fell off. I got to get back on track again. But I know we're close. I know we are close. We had some reruns for a little while. Catching back up, get back on our regular routine. And what a way to get back on the routine with something that I bet you haven't heard in a long time. Leaded or unleaded? But you haven't heard that in a long time.
No.
No, I can't even remember when I stopped hearing it. But then when I heard it again, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I remember that. Now I'm like, what grade of gas? But
right.
Before it was leaded or unleaded.
And remember not to grab that diesel pump.
Yeah.
I don't like it when they put it right there near the other one.
It is kind of wild.
Yeah.
At least glad that they changed the handle.
Yes. Yeah.
Or else I'd be all in a mess.
But yeah, it used to be leaded on one side and unleaded on the other.
There we go.
Yeah. That's when you didn't pump it yourself, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we say all that to say that today we have DeeAnn Guo, the community organizer for the Childhood Lead Action Program, on the show today.
Oh.
So she's going to be telling us about the good old leaded and unleaded times, as well as the importance of us monitoring our homes for lead.
Interesting.
Yeah. So without further ado, today joining us on Totally Preventable, we have DeeAnn Guo, the community organizer of the Childhood Lead Action Program. How are you doing today, DeeAnn?
I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
Well, pretty good. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to start it off just by learning a little more about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Awesome. Well, as I said, my name is DeeAnn. I am a community organizer. I have been living in Providence for 6 years, a little over 6 years now. And I'm just really interested in clean water, clean food. Those are the main things that brought me to lead because I was interested in the lead pipes issue. But since then, I've learned a lot about how lead poisoning can arise from a variety of different sources in our environment, which is scary, but also something that we can address. So since I started this work, it has only been a little over a year, but I've learned a lot about it, and that's how I got here.
Can you tell us about the primary sources of lead exposure in our community and how they disproportionately affect our children? I know Greg and I were around the same age, and we were like, oh, wow. I'm guessing like some people at a certain age have had a lot more exposure than kids these days. Like when we were kids, we were probably exposed to a lot of lead, and hopefully kids these days aren't, but where are they getting exposed?
The main sources of exposure of lead are paint and paint dust, soil, and water. Paint, because lead paint was used so widely before it was banned in 1978, and especially in Rhode Island because we have such an old housing stock, we see still a lot of lead paint in the houses. And a lot of times we ask or we require homeowners to kind of fix up lead paint, but we don't require them to remove it. So as time passes, it's just how things go. As newer layers of paint deteriorate, then the lead paint can become an issue once again. So paint dust caused by friction in surfaces like windows and door frames, that is also a big source. And I would say that's the major source of lead exposure. And then soil happens because there is exterior lead paint. Once again, lead was used everywhere back in the day. And there was also leaded gasoline. So that led to atmospheric kind of spread of lead that settled in soil. So that bare soil, uncovered soil, we say is one hazard. that can also lead to lead exposure. And finally, lead pipes. There are quite a number of older lead pipes that carry our water, and internal lead plumbing too as well sometimes, but the main sources are still paint and soil.
Wow. It wasn't until you said unleaded where I actually thought about, oh.
I was just gonna ask you, do you remember going to the gas station and having to say leaded or unleaded?
Wow. Wow, that's a, wow. I completely forgot about that. Yes, leaded or unleaded. Yes, do remember that. Wow.
Right,
The things you don't think about.
right. I hadn't thought about that for a while.
Can you share recent local statistics on childhood lead poisoning rates? And what trends have you observed over the past few years?
So the good news is that for the past 15, 20 years, there has been a significant decline in elevated blood lead levels, or like the number of children who get tested and have a elevated blood lead level through their blood test. In the past few years, though, there's, especially around COVID, there was like a little bit of a spike because children were spending so much time at home, where there might be a lot of paint and paint dust. This past year in 2023, there were almost 600, I think 595 children who still had an elevated blood lead level of 5 micrograms per deciliter. And that is what was used to be our reference value as considered elevated. But I will say that recently that level changed to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, and our most recent data, which is from 2022, showed us that we had over 1,000 children testing with over 3.5. And it's still important to note that there is no safe level of blood lead level. There's no safe level of lead exposure. And so it's really important that we try to prevent it as much as possible, the lead exposure and any lead poisonings.
Can you tell us the effects of the long-term, short-term effects of lead poisoning in children?
So lead poisoning can cause a variety of effects. Some can cause long-term effects, but a few could be kind of reading and learning challenges or behavioral challenges, difficulty paying attention or hyperactivity, speech delay, can lead to reproductive problems in the future or heart health problems. And it's especially important that we address it and prevent it because these things affect a child's development, and children are especially susceptible because they're so young and they're growing. And lead is a toxic metal that impacts their cell growth.
Now, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions that people would have about lead poisoning? Some of the myths that need to be busted.
I think one thing we hear a lot is sometimes people say, well, I grew up with a lot of lead and I'm totally fine. So I'm like, what's the big deal?
Relatives.
And that's not always the case, but we do hear that quite a bit. And it is true that like many people have grown up surrounded by lead and lead exposure, but we now know more about the impacts of that. And we want to try to encourage people that even though this might be something you're accustomed to, it is still a toxin and it is something that is totally preventable. So we want to try to do as much as we can right now to mitigate these lead hazards.
Can you tell us a little more about the mission and vision of your organization?
Yeah, so the Childhood Lead Action Project, we're a nonprofit. We were founded over 30 years ago now in 1992. mainly by parents of children who were affected by lead poisoning. But now our mission is to eliminate lead poisoning in Rhode Island through parent support, education, and grassroots organizing. So we do a lot of work in cities across the state trying to connect with parents who have been affected or tenants, and educate landlords, homeowners, and tenants as well, parents, about what lead poisoning is, what you can do. And we also work in advocacy to try and support policies that will help us get towards that ultimate goal, which is 0 children getting poisoned in Rhode Island.
You've mentioned that, and now is that lead paint? Is that ever like, does paint dust go away or?
So yeah, that's a good question. Something that we tell parents and homeowners, anyone living in an older home, to look out for is peeling paint, chipping paint, cracking paint. And one way to kind of clean up lead in case you see paint chips on the ground is to pick them up, remove them. But another thing, as I mentioned before, is that for surfaces that encounter friction, so like very old windowsills, a lot of us have old windows and old doors. Friction against those surfaces creates paint dust. And in many cases, the paint dust can be invisible. So we encourage people to clean with wet methods, like with a wet mop and wet cloths, to kind of prevent sweeping around and dispersing the lead dust, which in some cases you can't even see. But I think that brings us to a good point of advice, which is to find out if your home is built before 1978, and also to then see if it is, does it have a lead certificate? If in Rhode Island, if you're living in a home built before 1978, and if you're renting in that home, then it should have a lead certificate. If you're a homeowner, you can certainly get a lead inspection to see where the lead surfaces are, if any, but you're not required to have a lead inspection. Only if you're a tenant, it is a requirement that your landlord get a lead inspection and have a valid lead certificate on file.
Can you paint over lead paint, and does it still?
Yeah, so
Or?
we kind of in Rhode Island say that if the paint is captured, if it's not actively, if it's sealed, then that is considered lead safe. We don't necessarily require everything to be lead free. As long as it's lead safe, then it should be okay for people to interact with it. But I will say that, for example, getting a lead certificate to kind of declare that your home is lead safe, those only last for 2 years, because with normal wear and tear and time going on, these certificates expire, and then you must get re-inspected or checked out again to ensure that things are still lead safe.
How can community members get involved with your organization?
We are always looking for people who feel strongly or who want to learn more about lead poisoning. We think that having a community who cares about lead poisoning comes from people within, like teaching one another as much as it is coming from, say, like government agencies or people like us. So I think getting educated about lead poisoning or lead in general, and sharing with your friends and family is really big. We teach workshops for parents. We do things like house parties. Sometimes parents, if they get a group of their friends, we can come in and sort of do a little party, just doing lead education. But also we have community coalitions. Currently, we have them in Central Falls, Providence, and Woonsocket. And sort of, if you're part, and Cranston. And right now, if you are part of those communities or care a lot about one of those communities, you can come and help make your voice heard, give your feedback on different projects we're doing around lead poisoning prevention. Yeah, and then hear more about advocacy efforts and ways that we are supporting tenants and people currently going through lead poisoning.
Do you have specific programs or initiatives for new parents or parents to alert them or remind them? I know when Greg and I were speaking earlier, I was talking about how my family had saved my crib for when I had kids, and my first daughter, we brought it out, and luckily someone in the family was like, "Oh, that probably has lead paint. You probably don't want to use that." But at that point in my life, I wouldn't have thought of that. So do you have different initiatives and programs to alert parents of lead poisoning?
We don't have a program ourselves as much, but we do work with the health department to try and encourage parents to make sure kids are going to their pediatricians and getting screened. Our efforts to prevent lead poisoning can only happen if we know what the problem is. And children are supposed to get tested twice before the age of 3, and then every year until they turn 6. And so that lead screening is really important. And we want to educate providers about that they are doing it. We want to ensure that parents feel comfortable, that they know what they're doing, what they're doing at the doctors, and are well informed of the results and the process. So that's something that we are always trying to tell people when we're doing our outreach, but we don't necessarily have a program specifically for that.
Now, with all your efforts, I'm sure there are some barriers. So what are some of your ongoing challenges, or what's the biggest challenge that you see, or the biggest pushback that you may encounter?
I think one challenge is getting children, enough children tested. There is a lot of confusion around lead sometimes, where we'll talk to parents who don't even know what lead is, and don't know that their children should have been tested. They don't know if their children has been, if their child has already been tested or not. Another barrier is sometimes it's hard for action to take place proactively, because lead exposure is something that's very preventable, and we want to try and address any possible risks before a lead poisoning happens. And sometimes it can feel like something that you can push off into the future, because everyone's fine right now, but we kind of are always striving to encourage people to do things proactively, and that's not always on the landlords, even though that is one of our main audiences. We're saying do things proactively, but also for municipal code enforcement departments. We ask and advocate for more proactive policies there, and more proactive actions from state and different intervening groups.
Do you guys have any goals or plans for any new advocacy or anything going on in the future? Near future?
Something exciting that's happening
Is it
is
exclusive, Greg? Here it comes.
Exclusive. Here we go.
Yeah, something exciting that's happening is that we are working to kind of connect with municipalities across the state who haven't had like a great focus on lead, or like don't have a point person in the city for lead complaints, and trying to just educate them on what lead is and what lead enforcement they are able to do that's in their purview. The lead certificate requirement for rental housing has been in place for almost 2 decades. But according to Housing Works, out of our, I think like 125,000 estimated rental units, only 11% have a lead certificate. This was our 2023 housing fact book that they published. So there is a long way to go to getting all our required units to being lead safe or being checked for lead safe. And I think that would be a great goal, to get everybody on board with that and continuously checking that we have a body of housing in the state that is up to a certain quality and safety.
Now, for local government or schools or other organizations or community-wide parents, even kids listening today, how can they get in touch with you? How can they get in contact with the Childhood Lead Action Program?
Well, they can give us a call at our number, which is 401-785-1310, or they can email us at info@leadsafekids.org, or they can message us and find us on social media. And we have people monitoring all of those things. We especially are there to help. We love to hear from anybody who has questions about lead. We talk to parents, we talk to people who aren't parents, we talk to tenants, we talk to landlords, healthcare providers, service providers, anybody. And if anybody wants us to come to their community, if they want to do a house party, or they want us to teach a workshop, we're always willing to try and make that happen.
All right. Now I know who to call for a house party.
It was so nice to meet you, DeeAnn. Thank you for all this information. I felt like I knew a lot about lead, but I guess now I do.
Now I do. Now I'm ready.
Yeah.
Ask me about lead. But thank you very much for your time, DeeAnn. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.